Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I am actually starting back up another ghost book reading video, and I'll be reading a chapter out of the South Carolina Ghosts from the Coast to the Mountains by Nancy Roberts. And the title of this chapter that I'll be reading out of is called The Apparition at Anderson College. So without further ado, let's get to it, shall we? In the darkness of the early morning hours, doors opened noisily and then slammed closed at Pitt High School in Greenville, North Carolina. The rhythmic sound of the basketball is heard striking the backboard, but the gym is locked and empty. It is said that this high school was built over an early cemetery. That's one cause of concern for bad spiritual energy right there. At Belloc College in Wisconsin, there are stories of eerie appearances, and at Belmont Abbey in Belmont, North Carolina, one of the dormitories is supposedly haunted by the ghost of a murdered nun. South Carolina schools are not immune from these rumors. A story in the December 19th, 1982 issue of the Anderson Independent Mail reports some highly unusual happenings at Sullivan Music Center on the campus of Anderson College. This graceful white column building was once the home of a succession of college presidents. There are conflicting stories about the likelihood of any supernatural events at Sullivan, but one is so absorbing the reader will at least want to hear it. To preserve his privacy from possible administrative probings, we will call the young man involved Hedgepeth. Weird name, but okay. A few days before all of the excitement reported in the newspaper, Richard Hedgepeth decided to drop by Sullivan on the off chance his roommate was there practicing, thinking that they might go somewhere off campus for supper. He entered the center and immediately heard the sound of a piano in one of the rooms. He opened the door. The room was illuminated only by the late afternoon light, and Hedgepeth was startled to see at the piano that fatuous, almost luminous figure of a girl. He managed to blur out, "Who are you?" And much to his amazement, the vapor's figure answered, "I am Anna, of course." "What do you mean, of course? Everyone knows me because of my father." "Your father?" "Yes, don't you know who he is?" "No. Papa is president of this school, stupid." Oh, we got an intelligent ghost right here. "I see. And why do you haunt this building?" "I am not free to do otherwise. Unless I really wanted to, I guess." "Why aren't you free?" "I must go out searching." "Searching for whom?" When he asked that question, the apparition rested a misty but nicely rounded arm on the edge of the piano and bowed her head. "I don't want to talk about it anymore." The thought occurred to him that she might disappear, and he pressed for more information. "If you will tell me, perhaps I can help you," he said conjointly. He hadn't the slightest idea just how. He was determined to find out more. He lifted her head and seemed to brighten. "How?" "First, I must know whom you are searching for." "For him," said the ghost calmly. Richard remained uncomfortably aware that he was not talking with a living person, for the communications from the spirit were wordless, its thoughts entering his own mind silently but with perfect clarity. "And who is him?" "My fiancé." "Well, what would you like for me to do?" "You can make my parents let me see him." "Why won't they?" "They said I'm too young to be engaged." "How old are you?" "I'm 16. And I told them they must let me marry him, or I will kill myself. But I didn't really mean to." "It seems you did. Are you sorry, Anna?" "Sometimes," she gave a sigh. "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about that. I don't want to be rude, but I mean, it just sounds like her parents are just too control parents, you know what I mean? Thinking that she can't get married at a young age. You see it all the time in history books that people got married when they were like 15, 16. I mean, what was the problem with that? Hate that she ended her life to her. Were there any reasons beside your age? He was Catholic and father didn't like that at all. Oh, different religion, I see. Was he handsome? Francis? Oh yes, he had blue eyes, curly black hair, and the fairest skin. Very much like the young man who comes here in the late afternoon and plays the piano. Probably talk about his friend. Okay, here's a picture they got right here of the Sullivan Music Center at Anderson College. You guys see that? Who is he? How should I know? He plays the most beautiful Strauss waltz. Can you remember one of them? He asked. She began to sing softly. It was a song about a widow. The music floated through the air and was so distinct he turned toward the door to see if someone else had entered the room. But they were alone. The song broke off in mid-phrase. You must promise to help me. If you don't, I'll misbehave. Misbehave? What are you going to do? You'll wait and see. There were mischievous laughter like a succession of silvery chimes. The girl's figure faded, and soon she had completely vanished, leaving the piano bench empty. He stood for a moment in amazement. Well, yeah, I'll be amazed, but shocked and creeped out at the same time. When Richard had entered Sullivan, the beautiful glowing afternoon light was turning the panes of the windows gold and making bright pathways on the floor. As he walked out between the tall white columns of the music center, it was almost dark. When he reached the dorm, he found his roommate, Frank Ward, reading. Frank, you've been over at Sullivan pretty often lately, haven't you? Yes. Have you ever seen anything unusual? No. What do you mean? No ghost or anything? Why would I see ghosts? I don't know. I was really just kidding, I guess. That's good. It makes me feel better about you. What do you play when you're over there? Frank's blue eyes darkened with grief. He frowned slightly and ran his fingers through his curly black hair. Richard, Dad was a music student here. Since his death, I get a feeling of closeness to him when I play some of his favorites. Do you ever play Strauss waltz? At the moment, there was a knock on the door, and a friend of Frank's came in. They eventually left the study together, and Richard's question went unanswered, but it remained in his mind. The next morning, as the two young men walked across the campus together to their first period class, Richard was amazed to see Donnie Martin, one of the maintenance workers, dash out of the Sullivan Music Center as if persuaded by Darth Vader. So in other words, like force choke him. Oh yeah, I'll be running too. What's the matter? Martin was followed by another maintenance man, Ernick Edwards, who appeared to be as agitated as Martin. There's something strange in that place, said Martin. There sure is. I heard that music get louder and louder. What music? But Richard was reasonably sure he knew. The piano and someone singing. What were they singing? I didn't stay around to find out. Hey, I wouldn't either if I heard music start playing. The closer we got, the louder the music was, added Edwards. So we went the other way. My heart can't take much of that. And he shook his head. Come on, Donnie, let's get a cup of coffee. And off they went. Frank looked bewildered, and Richard thought of what the girl had said about misbehaving. Was she carrying out her threat? Let's go in the center and see who else we could find to talk to, said Richard. The first person they saw was Jim Staggs, busily polishing the window panes. Have you ever heard anything in here? Asked Richard. Not too much, unless you count one morning about 9 o'clock when I was alone and I heard somebody walking around upstairs. The sound of those footsteps was plain as I could be. I went up there and checked all over the place. No one was there, but whatever it was had cut on a faucet full blast because the water was running. Sounds like she is misbehaving. Well, I guess that's about it. Staggs picked up his pail and cloths, and off he went. The two young men followed him out of the building, where they stood under the large oak just in front of the building. What music do you play when you stop off here in the afternoon, Frank? Oh, I don't know why. Any Strauss? Yes, I'm reading a book on him right now. Why are you interested? Because I think that's what I heard her playing. Heard who playing? You're losing your cool, man. Richard hesitated to tell his story, and Frank was silent for a moment. He seemed to be struggling to recall something. Richard, you know how your mom or dad sometimes talk about someone they used to date or who was in love with them? Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Once in a while, when Dad was feeling down, he wouldn't reminisce about a girl he fell in love with while he was in school here. I think he really went for her and wanted to marry her. She was the daughter of the college president. Of course! That was before he met Mom, and he never mentions it around her. Why did he marry the girl here? Back then, there were a lot of prejudice in the South toward Catholics, and her father didn't even want her to see Dad at all. So what happened? She committed suicide. Good Lord! Dad thinks she only meant to scare her father, but it didn't work out that way. She died. That was really bad. There was the sound of the front door of Sullivan closing, and they looked up to see maintenance director Aloud Paget coming down the steps. I want to speak to him a minute. Frank, wait for me. Sure. Aloud, tell me what's going on inside Sullivan. Paget looked a little angry. You want me to get in trouble, Richard? What do you mean? Oh, you know, the school's image and all that. Some people would rather I didn't talk about it at all. Hold it, Aloud. I think a girl really did commit suicide here. Frank's dad knew her. By now, they had followed Aloud along the side of the building. Aloud, let's go inside and talk for just a minute. All right. You've heard walking on the steps in here, haven't you? I didn't pay any attention to the walking up and down those steps until someone else told me they had heard it, said Paget. And what did you say? I told him I heard it too. What do you think it is? Asked Frank. A benign ghost. You really believe there's a ghost in here, Aloud? Asked Frank. I think there's definitely a presence or a force, whatever you want to call it, that lives in this music building. At the moment, they heard a thunderous choir that seemed to come from the piano in the room across the hall. They all rushed over to it. The room was empty. Frank quickly put his fingers on the keys, positioning them. Hey, I know that chord, Richard. He lifted his fingers and came down hard upon the keys. The reverberating notes were followed by a sharp crash. Ouch! Cried out Frank, for the lid behind the keys had fallen upon his fingers. I know that had to hurt. He removed his hands and shook them, making a face as he did so. Wasn't that the chord, Richard? That is the one we heard in the other room. All right. The two young men looked at each other incredulously. Frank never went back again to play at Sullivan, but Richard had returned several times. He is insistently curious about the apparition, although he hasn't seen the girl again. But both young men are convinced that someone was there. One caveat, if you should ask the administration at Anderson College about the ghost in the Sullivan Music Center, you will not find them eager to discuss the matter, nor do the maintenance men wish to talk about it, and there is no one who will admit to having heard of the suicide of the college president's daughter. In fact, the authoritative word from the college vice president, academic dean Paul Tamaj, is that nothing tragic had ever happened on this campus or in the music building. We leave it to our own readers and to the future generations of students to judge whether the ghost of a lovely girl does or has ever haunted Sullivan Music Center. My thoughts on it? Yeah, they're trying to cover it up because they don't want to have a disdained reputation on their hands. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more book reading content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and I said that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.